Mm-hmm. So that's a prop thing. What are the, I mean, you know, because like what comes to mind for me is like a costume shop. I feel like there's probably like some fairly reliable costume shops where you could go and get a crown. I mean, if you need it to be like really sort of specific or grand, and a plastic or fake prop is not going to do the trick. If you need to, you know, if you need metals in it, I would look into making one, looking into finding someone who could make one. I mean, props are tough because, like, if they don't exist in your world, they don't exist. So I would say, thinking about the needs of your film, first decide how much do you need a crown. You know, if you need one, then costume shop or build. But does your story need it? If not, don't drive yourself crazy, you know? Think about other ways to show royalty. It sounds to me like this world is fantastical, or is this like rooted in like a real history? It is. So you're actually creating like a period piece with like period accurate costumes. I mean, for a student film, that's a tall order. So I would say, I mean, so the crown has to look a certain way. Are you like basing this on historical imagery?
Have to look a certain way. I want it to be like accurate to what somebody would have worn then.
Well, I mean, are they in like a throne room? They are. So you're building a throne room for your short. I mean, find people in your world who are handy and ask them a big favor. Because that's kind of, I think it seems to me like you're building something very specific. What I would challenge you to do is, for your own sanity and for your, you know, the reality of executing on whatever budget and time limits you have, think about if it needs to be in a throne room. Because if it's not in a throne room, suddenly you don't have to build a chair, a throne. You don't necessarily have to have a crown on the head of your royalty, because if they're not in the throne room, maybe they're wearing, you know, maybe they're dressed for the hunt and they're in the woods. If this is a story about people drawing lots and some aren't going to live, maybe an outdoor setting that kind of calls to mind the royal hunt might be useful to you. If not, if you really need to do it in a throne room, the challenge is just finding people who are going to help you do that. But it does sound tough, just because if you're looking for a crown, just imagine the lights on the walls. Are you lighting torches? Are you hanging rugs? Is it stone? Like, where are you going to film that? So if you don't have answers to those questions, consider making your life easier and thinking of a different location. You can tell the same story in a different location. Does that help? Any other ideas for films?
So I'm making like a film based on like found footage,
Mhm.
and it's about like a biker who comes home to his home, but what he doesn't know about it is that there's something else inside his home with him that he's unaware of. So the way I have like the script written out so far is like once he gets home, all these events start happening. I'm just wondering if like I should include like the times where there's nothing like strange going on, just like fill in to make it a bit, instead of just like once it's in the action, should I just like space it out and make it seem a bit more like suspenseful?
Absolutely. If you don't set up reality, breaking reality won't feel like you've done anything. This is the core of conflict, and conflict as structure. So think about, you're making a 6-minute movie about someone entering a home that is possessed by an entity. Also, keep in mind that if you're doing found footage, usually the conceit of found footage is that there's someone filming. So is he making like a home video, or like, you know, is he TikToking, or is he, you know, whatever? If not, then keep in mind that like you might destabilize your audience. It's like here's someone behind the camera, but there's no one actually in the scene behind the camera. That might confuse. So just keep that in mind. But you can, if it's important that you want to film it that way, if it's an adult, maybe his kid's filming something, you know, maybe this kid is you making a movie for this festival, and then this unexpected thing happens. And then think about the structure of a movie that is creating a destabilizing force in the midst of reality. You want to have about a minute where reality is stable. That's Act 1. Act 1 is the status quo. Guy goes out, riding his bike, comes home, making breakfast, whatever, the family's around, normality. And then there comes a moment where normality breaks. That's the conflict that launches you into the second act of your story, which is the conflict sort of playing out, which is in a haunted house movie, the increased malevolence of the presence. So the way that you break reality is I'm pouring half and half in my coffee, and I put the half and half right here. Then I open the fridge, because I'm going to put it back. Half and half's not there anymore. Where's the half and half? Now it's over here. What the hell? That's the small break. And then it's, okay, I'm going to just accept that because maybe I had a mental glitch. Go get the half and half, put it in the fridge, close it, go into the other room to grab something, come back in, fridge door hanging open, half and half spilled on the floor. You're ratcheting up the tension of your malevolent presence. And then at a certain point, the conflict needs to resolve in a face-off of sorts. Now, in Paranormal Activity, which is a found footage ghost movie, the way that the conflict resolves in a face-off is when the person actually is affected in a violent way. They're dragged by their heels down the hallway by an invisible force. You might not be able to do that with your resources and budget. So what does your thing look like? Your thing might look like, if you can get away with this, the entire kitchen getting trashed. And then think about what you want your character to learn or not learn. So your first minute is Act 1, normality. From minutes 2 to 5, it's the increasing break from reality, the increase in malevolence. You reach a fever pitch, the biggest, most malevolent thing. The kitchen gets destroyed. He gets bullied. He gets pushed. Something, screaming upstairs. The kids are in trouble. And then the last minute is resolution. In Paranormal Activity, the resolution is you get possessed and you're dead. Or is it run out of the house and call the cops? Or is it, you know what? I don't have time for this. I'm going to put everything away and look around and walk out and go about my normal life, because that's probably what a lot of people would do. You just have to think about conflict resolution is really the journey of your character. Normal life, take for granted. Not normal, everything I take for granted being challenged. And at the end, where does that leave me? Acceptance, defiance, win, lose. And that is really a personal choice for a filmmaker, because that's kind of how you want. Is this a tragedy? Is this a comedy? Is this a story about overcoming? In 6 minutes, you don't have a ton of time. So think about the payoff. A lot of times, short horrors tend to end with the good guy losing, because that's the quickest thing to do. Dying unexpectedly at the end of a 6-minute movie happens like that. You don't have to call an exorcist, because you don't have a half hour to tell that story. So think about your limitations in that regard. More ideas? More questions?
So, I have an idea. I like what you said before, the thing where you talk about how you don't have to show actively, like in the Blair Witch, they don't show the witch ever.
Mm-hmm.
But then, in that case, how do you get the audience to be afraid of something if there's no build-up to what it actually is? Because my idea, there was something where it's supernatural, but it's not like the witch where, magical things happen and scare people, and that it's a physical creature.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you make people afraid of that when it can't do anything supernatural outside of being itself and just being a horrifying thing?
I'm going to show you a clip because it answers that question in a way. I hope that this just works, but who's seen No Country for Old Men? Okay, good. So Josh Brolin is this character who finds a bag of money in the midst of a shootout between drug dealers and their buyers. And he wanders into this scene of chaos, finds a bag of money, and leaves with it. But then he's immediately sort of haunted by the specter of this psychopath who's trying to track him down to find the money. And in Brolin's mind, the entire time, it's no matter where I go, no matter what I do, this person is right behind me. And so in this scene, he realizes that there's a transponder hidden in the bag of money and that he is moments away from being attacked. So let's watch. This is an example I was going to show earlier, but we ran out of time. I'm not even going to bother holding the camera up, or well, maybe I will, the microphone, because this scene is about the absence of sound. It's about the absence of light. It's about the absence of dialogue. Everything about this scene is less. Of course, now we're going to do
Gun
this.
owners know that total concealment of your firearm is a tactical advantage.
People who watch clips of No Country like concealing their firearms.
Stay in the way.
So as you watch this, what the Coen brothers are doing here is they're establishing the impending threat of a opposing force before the opposing force even arrives. They've attached the opposing force to an object. That is a transponder, but for all intents and purposes in this scene, it's haunted, because now he knows that holding that has put a target on his back. And so already before the threat arrives, we feel it approaching. Notice how there's no music, there's no suspenseful soundtrack, there's no dialogue. The only thing that you can hear is the air conditioning unit in the room. So you don't even have to worry about sound design. It's about the absence of sound, about the approach of something unseen and unknown. And look how long they make you wait. This is suspense in real time. This is a 3-minute sequence. So if your movie was about someone being hunted, you can spend a lot of time building up the suspense with nothing but silence and wait. So look at what they were able to do. Without sound, with one source of light, without music, and without more than one actor, the intense pressure of the approach of that thing is felt so viscerally because you know what it's like, because you're living in his skin, to feel the impending doom of the thing that's approaching. So the reason why I thought it would make sense to show that is because you're basically saying, like, how do you create something, how do you create a threat out of something unseen? Think about all the things a thing in the world has associated with it that aren't just the way it looks. It's the way it sounds, it's the way it moves, it's the objects associated with it. Like, a lesser filmmaker would have had Brolin waiting inside the door, and then the door would have gotten kicked in and there would have been a shootout. But, like, think about the mileage that that scene gets out of 2 feet in a little strip of light. And even in that moment, you think, okay, here it comes, here it comes. But the bad guy's smart. He knows that there's a strip of light and that his feet are showing. So he steps out of the way, and we don't see this. We have to sort of surmise this. He takes his jacket off, and he puts his jacket down behind the door to kill the light so that he can then step in front of the door and attack. So, yes, in this movie, Anton Chigurh, the bad guy, does bust in and there is a shootout. But it takes a while to get there. And as we've seen with Blair Witch, you never actually have to get there. You know, in your film, if you're trying to create a threat out of something that never appears, you can do that in a way where you establish the presence, and the presence is bad enough. And obviously, the way you want to resolve it depends a lot on, you know, I mean, do you have a concept that you want to pitch further so we can pitch it further? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't. I mean, what's the resolution? Is does this thing appear, or is it always sort of on the periphery?
It appears. It's sort of the main character finding the remnants of what it is, and then at the end of it, it appears to him, and not good things ensue.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the main idea of it. I was just concerned about how do you have the impact of, okay, there's something that I want the audience to be afraid of, but what can I do to make them afraid of it? Because, like, I mean, if you take something like a bear and you have no concept of what a bear is, if you never see it and you only get that, like, a person who comes across one dies, you don't have any build-up to being afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of, at the end, you just be taken aback and be like, oh, they're dead now.
Right. Well, I mean, so take the example of a bear. If you want to film a story about someone who's being stalked by a bear through the woods, but you don't have access to a bear, what do? You open the story with someone who gets an alert on their phone about a bear sighting. And then they're in the woods, and they're on their hike, and then tree snaps. And it's like, okay, and then nothing there. And then you come across, you know, the remnants of an eaten animal. It's like, I'm now in the zone of the thing. It's the stuff it leaves behind, the sounds it makes. You know, if you were doing a haunted house story about someone who sort of invites this presence in, or, you know, a story about a guy who's running from a gangster, make your character at fault for the thing. Brolin wouldn't have the transponder if he didn't take the money. He invited the presence in. If it's a ghost, maybe this person is in the woods or at a graveyard, or like stumbles across like a weird circle of stones that looks ritualistic and sees a little thing in the center and is like, ooh, this is cool, I'm gonna take it home with me. You've now invited it in. So that the object, the haunted object, whether it's real or fantastical, not only implicates your character in the event, it makes them at fault, which is always more interesting from a character level. It also gives you something to anchor. Does the story end with that person being like, you know what, I'm putting it back, you know? Or does it end with that person being like, actually, I'm keeping it, and then horror ensues? So a thing that is a threat has a lot of stuff attached to it that's not just its body. It's the footsteps. It's the way it influences light. It's the sounds it makes in a silent room. It's the objects that it wants. or Left Behind. Think about all those things. Create the trail of slime for your slug. Say again?
Can you have a thread that has like a constant appearance towards the audience but not the actors?
Yeah, I think so. Think about like Jaws, for example. The audience before someone's attacked in a movie like Jaws. Have you seen Jaws? Oftentimes, you signal to the audience that they are now in danger. They're just swimming around. They're having a good time. But then this is an example of music that, by the way, you could create on your own. You don't have to option if you think about music cues or sounds. Dun-dun is the first signal to the audience that something's coming. Then usually they do a POV shot. Part of the reason why people often refer to Jaws as a slasher movie is because it has all the dressings of a slasher film. It's the sound cues. Early on in have you seen the early slasher movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th? POVs are huge in those, right? Before you see the thing that's coming after the people, you see the POV of the thing watching the people, and there's usually a sound. In Halloween, it's that little stinger that they do with like a little high note on a piano. In Friday the 13th, it's and that's how you know that the thing's coming. In Jaws, it's and then the POV moves in. And then you're back to the person, brushing their hair in a mirror, swimming in an ocean, walking through the woods. And then it's back to the POV, closer. Then it's back to the person, back to the POV, closer, 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 closer. That's how you execute the audience is aware of the attack, which is kind of like a slasher technique because like the points of those movies is sort of the giddy excitement of the thing, the attack. So you build the excitement by letting the audience be ahead of the character in the movie, right? And in all of those examples, you don't really ever have to show the thing until the moment of attack. So, in the early scenes of the early slasher movies, you never see what's attacking the kids at Camp Crystal Lake in the first Friday the 13th until the very end of the movie. You see POVs, you get sound cues, and then you get some act of violence that is disembodied. If you wanted to show the thing in its full physicality, think about the classic shot from Halloween, where Jamie Lee Curtis is walking to school with her friends, and the camera pulls out, and Michael Myers is standing at the other end of the block, like kind of half concealed by shrubbery, and you see him watching. The stalker is there watching, acquiring its target. Does that sort of answer your question, or do you want to pitch something, like, is there something more specific you're trying to work out?
I was trying to make something similar to like the Blair Witch,
Mm-hmm.
but like I wanted the thread to be like on the screen like constantly, but like in the background
Mm-hmm.
to show like there is a thread that the audience knows, but like the people don't know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the good news is that if you watch all the best horror movies, you're gonna see the tricks of the trade. So if you want to show it in all of its specificity, there's the Michael Myers shot. But there's also a trick that, like, have you seen the James Wan movies, like Insidious and Conjuring and those sorts of movies? Go watch Insidious. There's the family's moving into a house, and there's a scene where Rose Byrne is sort of just walking around the first floor, kind of like, doing the mundane stuff of like moving into a house, moving this here, moving that there, doing some dishes, moving a box, whatever it is. And as she's moving through the rooms, the camera's with her the whole time. So we're very much like in the zone of the character. We're in their point of view, but we're not in their actual point of view. We're in their sort of periphery, in their bubble. So she's so focused on doing this over here that the camera just captures a set of legs hanging out behind the window draping. And so for the audience, what's nice about a moment like that, the reason why it works so well in horror, is because only about 50% of the audience notices. And so when you're watching that movie in a theater, half the audience goes, ugh, and the other half's like, what just happened? I missed it. And then they're like on guard. They're waiting for the next thing. And so the next time when you show it again, 100% of your audience is going to capture it because the other 50% has been cued in. And so always show less first. In a slasher, it's the POV, it's the sound. In a ghost movie, it's just the camera just captures it like that. You know, like oftentimes, like someone will, before the ghost actually attacks, someone's down in a dark room, and they flip on a light, and you get the of the thing behind them, but they don't see it. We know it's there in the house. But now they're going upstairs and they're brushing their teeth in the bathroom, and we're like, it's in the house. When's it going to come? But because we've seen it. So it's those stings. Show a little more, show a little more, and then if it eventually does wrap its arms around your character, that's the climax of that progression.
So I like this parody idea of the fusion of like war or like zombie movies, where like it's this like comedy movie about like this zombie spy who's like spying on these group of kids to see where their brain is located for them to find. So like throughout the story, it's the zombie. It's like the group of kids slowly realizing that the zombie is like not a person, and it's a zombie slowly like having to like locate the brain as fast as possible. And the zombie like wears like a little mask with someone's face on it to deceive the group of kids for like the start of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm struggling to find or is like how do I make the zombie without copyright? Because like I have to like use like a mask, like a zombie mask, and like use like zombie noises, but I'm not sure how to do that.
Okay, well, first of all, it's a fun idea. I mean, what are the essential components of a zombie, really? It's just the look of death, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need a mask. A mask will look fake. In fact, it almost kind of feels to me like maybe there's like you're playing a little game where the human's not wearing a zombie mask, the zombie's wearing a human mask. And so there's kind of like a dramatic irony happening where the monster is posing as a human, but the monstrous stuff is slipping through, right? So like if you had the ability to do this, in fact, I feel like there's movies like Death Becomes Her. It's a funny movie from the early 90s you should check out. Or like even like, have you seen Men in Black?
Oh yeah, I see it.
So you know how like in the first Men in Black, the alien is in that body of the guy, and he's trying to pose as a human, but he's doing kind of a bad job of it. And he's like moving all funny because there's a big alien inside his skin, and like his ear falls off at one point, and he grabs it, and he's like, like that. So it's kind of like the trick that you're going to have to pull off is, you want to create the look of like decay. You can do that with makeup, dark circles under the eyes, pale skin, that sort of thing. And then you want to cover that with the look of humanity, right? Am I getting it right?
Yeah.
And then let the monstrous stuff slip through. So, have you seen that meme where Steve Buscemi is like an undercover cop in a high school, and he's like, hello, fellow kids, and he's clearly like 50 years old? That's the joke you're playing, right? Hello, fellow humans. Isn't it weird how our brains are located in our chests? And they're like, what? And it's like, oh, no, where are the brains located? You tell me. And they're like, the head. And he's like, oh, like that's the comedy, right? So it's that dissonance. And it's cool because there's a very interesting concept in a human disguise for a non-human thing. Did I answer the question? I can't tell.
But like I'm not sure like how I can do like I'm also like confused like at the wait never mind.
Well, I mean, like you asked about copyright.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. You can't copyright makeup. I mean, don't go out and buy like a Walking Dead mask, but you can watch a Walking Dead episode and mimic the makeup. There's no rule against that. And you don't have to like don't go online and sample the of like a Night of the Living Dead zombie, your zombie is different anyway, right? Your zombie is actually capable of pretending to be human. So if you're doing the really sort of goofy joke, it's the like, you know, the zombie being like, you know what would be really good right now? Like brains. Like that's not copyrighted. Or you're doing it more subtle, where like we're like, what's wrong with this kid? And he's like, this kid's weird. And then you slowly realize that the kid is in disguise. Have you seen Warm Bodies?
No.
Go watch Warm Bodies. It's Nick Holt plays a zombie, but the rules of zombiehood are very different. He still has a lot of his humanity. So it's this weird conflict of a kid who is a zombie, but also still has all the sort of thoughts and concerns of a teenager. That might help you realize that, like, you don't have to stick within one conception of what a zombie is. You can break all the rules, as long as you eventually signal that what this kid's really after is brains. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So working on Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp, like how did you go about making a sequel and like incorporating all the things that people loved about the first movie while also like trying to make something like new and different and exciting?
Well, so that, I mean, in a lot of ways, when you are making a sequel, it's not about taking away the things that people liked. It's about adding new elements to them, right? So, I mean, the nice thing about Ant-Man 2 is that we knew that at some point he was going to go giant. And so playing with, you know, what people really liked about the first movie was scale. It's like, it's really fun when he is small and we're living in this world that's big. So let's do the opposite. Let's make him go big and have all the chaos of that and play around with that. And then it's also giving your character more toys. You know, like, it's not just the guy that shrinks, it's the cars that shrink. The lab is a rolling suitcase. It's like, oh, so you guys like shrinking people? Well, guess what? We can shrink a lot of things. That's like the sort of superficial response, but it is kind of what it is, right? And then there's, I mean, the deeper answer that's maybe less interesting is evolving the characters, implicating more people into the story. You know, at the end of the first movie, Scott sort of accepts the fact that it's not my life as a thief or my family. It's actually me using my thieving skills as a superpower to protect my family. In the second movie, he's dealing with the repercussions of that, but he doesn't have to go on that journey anymore. We've already done that journey. So in the second movie, it's like, okay, here's a challenge for your thieving skills that is amplified, bigger, louder. I mean, like, you know, there's not a ton of, you know, really intense, complex character work in these movies. So to some degree, it's about spectacle. You know, you liked the first song, so I'll play the second one louder. But you do want your character to have more struggle. If you broke their leg in the first movie, break both their legs in the second movie. In the first movie, he had a guy that was sort of evenly matched. The villain was sort of like the same skill set. Let's give him a villain that outmatches him. So he needs to loop in more people. He needs more help. He needs the Wasp, which is a whole other component to that, which is servicing that character, because it was actually the first time a female character was in the title of a movie, so we had to service her journey. I think we're wrapping up, unfortunately. Thanks for coming, everyone.